On a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and John Kahn, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my music heroes, this is the Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome everybody inside the Blackwood Broadcasting Studios at an institute of higher learning that remains undisclosed. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We're happy to have all of you along with us today. Happy International Jazz Day to all of you out there as well. We are currently living through a vapid time in our country's musical landscape, one filled with inanimate objects serving as humans, an incessant need for perfection, and a general lack of understanding of what has come before. My job as a journalist is not to critique or provide reasons why this has taken place, although the reasons are many, but rather hearken back to a period in our country's musical evolution when the cross-fertilization of idioms was flourishing. It flourished because of artists who lived the music: Joe Williams, King Curtis, Woody Herman, Harold Land, and others who sought to create and take their show on the road in metropolitan cities. They saw it as their responsibility to play the music for the people and serve as role models for a cadre of musicians who were coming into their own, searching for their own individuality and love, ideas, and stick-to-itiveness to the sessions they took part in. These accompanists knew their job was to make the leader sound as good as possible, be it a Hollywood soundtrack, a Motown record, or a record session. These accompanists wanted to keep the calendar filled and brought their spiritual energy to the session, in which many ways made the album. My guest today was one of the most prominent and freewheeling studio musicians in the Western world. It could have been working with Bernard Purdie, Cornell Dupree, and Richard T. It could have been with Paul Humphrey, George Bohannon, and Charles Kennard in soul jazz settings. It could have been with Spider Webb and Hamp Hawes playing funk under jazz, or playing jazz over rock with Steely Dan, and on and on and on and on. My guest's resume reads something like that out of a fairy tale. Aretha Franklin, Donald Byrd, The Crusaders, Gary Burton, Bobby Humphrey, Joe Cocker, Gary McFarlane, Tim Buckley, Elvin Jones, Phil Upchurch, Mose Allison, Quincy Jones, Etta James, and many more. Chuck Rainey, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, Jake, thank you very, very much. That was quite an introduction. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's not a problem. It's nice to talk to you, my friend. I wanted to talk to you, just for the record. Chuck and I have already had quite a few conversations off the air. I wanted you to talk to my audience about a rhythm section that you had to deal with that did not include guys like Paul Griffin and Eric Gale and Bernard Purdie, guys that maybe were a pain in the neck, and how you dealt with them and how you dealt with the harnessing your ego, so to speak.
Well, first off, I love music and I love to play music, and very proud to be a bass player. So in saying that, no matter what the music situation is, the music always came first with me. In trying to do the best I could, as a bass player, to provide a good foundation, rhythmically and melodically, to what was being played. And when it comes to getting along with people that you don't socially agree with or politically agree with, it sort of comes after the fact of the music. So for me, it's all because I love to play the bass. I love to be there, number one. Those things are sort of outside of playing the music. There are a lot of situations where you have negative conversations on a break or before you play a particular song. But once you begin to play, what's been indicated to play, that sort of, for me, all went out the window. And I just forgot about it because I wanted to play the bass, even when I didn't think a particular player was playing what I thought he or she should have been playing. But then again, that was just my opinion. However, you got to deal with what it is and how it is, and I could be wrong. As a matter of fact, I've learned a whole lot about that. Not to have too much of an opinion about what someone else is doing, unless it's interfering with the overall feel of the project. So I guess to answer your question is I dealt with it mainly by just not thinking about it when it came to playing the music.
I think that the reason I bring it up is I have friends today that are in bands and they're growing and they're trying to make it and they get these are more like, bands that would tour. And I realize that a lot of your touring and a lot of the, like King Curtis or the Beatles or, with Aretha Franklin or, a lot of your touring days were early in your career. But I really am curious to know, it's just people seem so finicky. Oh, well, I guess my question is, if some guy has the chops, does that outweigh what a pain in the neck they possibly could? It's about the music. So you tolerate them as people, even if they have post-traumatic stress disorder or they have, they're just really feisty or they constantly want to be the center of attention. At what point do you cut that cord?
Well, it's kind of hard to say right off the bat. There's some situations where you just have a situation with another player that's not comfortable on what's to be done. But as soon as the song is counted off, again, it does not matter. Like for me, as long as, because somebody hired it all, and the person that hired us had a reason for hiring us, so basically, you're always playing with someone who's competent as you are. Especially if I'm competent, everybody that I play with, they're competent to be there. They may not be the best choice all the time, but still, music is music. And I've always just, I guess what you're asking, I do understand what you're asking. It's very, very kind of hard. It's very hard for me to answer that in that it doesn't affect me.
Mm-hmm.
Does not affect me. We had a conversation earlier about how difficult it can be working with people who would have rather have had someone else playing the bass. And for political reasons or for whatever social reasons, I end up playing the bass. And I can tell that this person would rather have had their person play the bass. In some cases, you run across some of these people who really try and make you look foolish by overwriting a bass part or writing something very, very difficult or still just putting up with or having an attitude towards you even if you're making up a part. There's a way that this person, although he may be, just for the sake of a better word, maybe be a jerk at explaining what they want, how they want to do while they're trying to put you down, they still are professional, and what they want to do can work. Anything can work if it's done right. So, that has happened to me a few times. And also, too, I've had to put up with, not put up with, but deal with situations where it's just the opposite. I'm working with someone that I really don't care for a lot of reasons outside the music, but we're there to do music. And no matter what I don't care about them outside of the music, they are there to try and get the job done because tomorrow for a musician is very important. You do the best thing that you do today so that you can come back tomorrow and continue it. So there are just ways of not taking things personal to the point to where it's going to stop the process of making the music.
The reason
even after.
No, because you brought up something really, really important in our first interview, and you may not have used the word harnessing, or it was like controlling the ego, and I feel like early on, as a musician, you're more insecure, with yourself. So if someone's writing over a bass part, or they're blatantly being disrespectful, when you're younger, you have a tendency to take it more personally, and I'm trying to figure out where you coined that term of taking control of the ego, because it also refers to the fact that Chuck Rainey, as a bass player, you were so busy, it took you 3 years before you even decided to take a vacation. You were so busy, and your chest was all thumped out. And it's kind of like, so it's a twofold thing. You know, you have to control your ego when you feel like you're being upstaged, and you also have to control your ego when you think you're all that. And I think there's no better person than to talk to about how you balance that in a musical setting.
Well, for me, it's very easy. Again, I go back to the fact that I love to play music, and I love music. So I guess I was raised that way. I come from a situation, an environmental situation where you could be wrong as many times as you are right. And in being wrong, usually the ego, well, I'll talk about me. Of course, now I didn't come out the womb being this way.
Right.
You know, you have to learn it, and you deal with it before I left home. I had to deal with situations where I feel this particular way about something and it's not too good about a particular situation. However, I see what happens to other people who have the same attitude because of what was said or what was done, and to find that they slowly don't enjoy having a full life. And I'm talking about musicians in particular. They don't enjoy the full aspect of having the experience to be in all kinds of situations and to play the music. And I watch and see what happens to people when they take things too personal, where everybody else don't see it that way. It's the ego inside that doesn't want to be talked to a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ego inside that wants to at least project itself, what it thinks, especially if it has some experience. So younger people have more of an opportunity to really learn these things rather than an older person, because an older person is more formed in the way that they are and how they take things. Whereas the younger people, they have a tendency to see all aspects of what is being done. And you can't have a fight with somebody just because you think something was said to you improper. That was improper. I remember being on tour in Japan with a musician who brought his family with him, his wife and his child, and they were not prolific or proficient English speaking. He was not. They weren't English that way. And we were having a sound check, and his sound check was before mine. And so when I got to my sound check, they were trying to move the lights around. They were trying to do something, and I used this player's name. I said, I'm not like him. I do this, and he does that. His wife overheard it, and she did not speak English well and was just very, very new being in the States. She went back and told him that I said something negative about him because she heard me mention his name.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a problem with me for a while, and nobody could really understand what it was. They thought that I had done something. They asked him if he didn't like what Chuck said. He didn't like what I said about him. So I went to him. I said, "What are you talking about?" And he was hemming and hawing. I said, "Listen, you and your wife are just new to English. Number one, she should not be here. You and your family should not be here because of this. I love the guy. I told him I loved him. I would never say anything. What can I possibly say to anybody that's negative about him when I'm doing my sound check, to have her go back and have him have this kind of attitude on a tour outside? We were in Japan. To have this kind of attitude over something that was just stupid. His ego and her ego took charge. I explained to him, you do not understand the language, and your wife should not be snooping, and she shouldn't be here, and that's true, because these kind of things happen. So he apologized, and he understood, and we're friends to this day. But that's just one example where your ego can jump up and feel a particular thing where it's not really necessarily true. So that's why I say you can't take everything too personal. And even if it is direct to you and it is personal, it's a bigger person to receive it, take it, because you are hired to get the music done. And if it bothers you to the point to where you don't want to do it again, or you're going to have a verbal fight or a fist fight, just don't take the job anymore. But all those negative things hurt the music. It also hurts your reputation.
The reason I bring it up is I think about it in today's society, younger generations, my generation, a little more prickly, a little more sensitive. And when you went to the West Coast, Southern California, and you're dealing with guys like Harvey Mason, and you're dealing with guys like Joe Sample, and you're dealing with guys like Phil Upchurch, Bobby Porter Hall, and all these, before that it was Eric Gale, and it was, Griffin and Cornell Dupree, Bernard Purdy. It was a team, man. I mean, talk about how you got, let's just do an example. Somebody gets a little fired up, maybe Upchurch gets fired up. How did you guys work it out? Because it's obviously something when you don't know someone as well. Like you said, the wife was being kind of snoopy. That's a different story. But with your generation, I love to hear about situations where, maybe somebody was a little edgy or fired up, but ultimately that team concept, that brotherhood came in and was able to keep it together.
We are basically talking about a situation where, number one, you have to take a person's personality and character. That comes along with the musicianship. If they're a good musician, even if they have a personality or a character that's not particularly desirable, once you go 1, 2, 3, 4, go in the music, you know that the music is professional and the music is good. When you see people that are associated over and over and over again with each other, it means that they get along musically. They don't necessarily have to go home with each other or socialize together, but they get along well musically. And if the leader is a jerk, then you accept it because he's the leader. If the leader's nice, you accept that. Of course, leaders get into trouble because they have trouble with musicians if they're not liked. Everybody likes to be around people that they basically socially like, that are nice people. And I've worked with a lot of nice people. You mentioned Harvey Mason, very a gentleman, very well educated, excellent musician.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Benny Golson, working for Benny Golson. What a wonderful human being. Just a real nice guy. Now, of course, it's easy to mention all the nice guys, and I'm not going to mention the guys that weren't that nice. But even the guys that were not that nice,
mm-hmm.
They had talent, they knew what they wanted to do, and some people just have difficulty in explaining what they want to do or directing what they want to do, and then you never know what the reasons are. But it's their gig, they hired you, or they're the artist that's featured, and they wouldn't be there unless they had something going on musically. So you just accept, like you don't have to like your neighbor, but you live next door to him, and y'all got to water the lawn and take care of business, With me, the people that you just named are people that, one of the reasons why you find our names together associated on track, on projects, is because, number one, we work well together. Your average producer back in the day, I imagine that way today, is once one producer or one artist has success with one group of musicians, the best thing for another producer to do or artist to do, if they're going to record in particularly, is to try and get the same musicians. Because a lot of people think that the job is easy being a studio musician, but it's not that easy. There's a certain way that you have to hear things. There's a certain way that you have to play so that things are produced properly. And it's not easy. But once you do commit, like a drummer has to hit the snare in the same place all the time in order to get a consistent sound for the engineer. It takes training and experience to do that. Most road players don't do that. They hit the snare anyway, anywhere, because it's a mic and it's amplified. But there's certain things that studio musicians basically come to grips with, the more experience they have, because, those are the best recordings. So another person wanting to do a project, they usually go back and get the same people because of the experience there. So that's why you get the same group of people. In my New York years, I worked with about the same group of musicians almost my entire career there in New York. Although I was in a few different environments, but basically the same guys all the time. And I think it's a smart way to do something. It's very, very difficult for a new guy to get in. which is why you see a lot of the same names on the same records.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, we're talking about very sort of like, esoteric, relationship kind of stuff. And the truth is, when you listen to we've listened to a lot of music already, and we're going to listen to more now. But it's like when you hear the music, you're like, everybody must be having a ball. But that's not always the case. But we have, for the legions of Chuck Rainey fans out there, jazz being the type of music that is a blend of all musics, I think it's just totally appropriate to have a guest like Chuck Rainey on the program. And I'd like to cue up this first track. Not sure the last time you heard it. Probably haven't heard it since the session. And we'll come back and we'll talk about it, okay?
All right.
So, does that ring a bell at all?
Nope.
Yeah, we got that was off a soundtrack, Black Girl from 1973. Merl Saunders.
Oh, Merl, bless his heart. Yeah, Merl.
Merl, and you. When did you first meet Merl?
I met Merl in New York. He was the MD when Muhammad Ali was doing a Broadway show. I forget the name of that show. Muhammad Ali was doing. I can't think of the name of that Broadway show, but Merl was the conductor.
Really? Wow. I didn't. I had no. So and then you were on that. You were doing you were in the pit for that.
No. As a matter of fact, I didn't play that. I wasn't there. I met him through Ralph McDonald.
You met him,
and he was in New York during that time. I think that show lasted for about maybe 6 weeks, and just socially ran across him while he was in New York. But I was not the bass player.
Right, and then the thing that I love is that so that name of that tune was Chalk-Light Puddin', and you had Gaylord Birch on drums, who really was a serious unsung Oakland drummer. You guys, and then Bill Summers and Ken Nash on percussion, Michael Howell on guitar. This was more of a Bay Area crew. I don't know if you remember going up to Fantasy at that time, but I
went up to Fantasy quite a few times. Orrin Keepnews and his wife, they were family friends. And so I went up to Fantasy quite a few times. You know, Merl Saunders also did the soundtrack to Fritz the Cat and Heavy Traffic.
Oh, I know those. You played bass on Fritz or on both?
Oh yeah, yeah. We had a lot of fun.
Can you talk about, like, that's what, so you get into a situation, you meet Merl, someone like Merl, very charismatic guy, and was a bridge to so many different, such a big impact on the regional music scene of the Bay Area. But you get up to a session like that. What was his leadership style like? I mean, you guys were like, were you just all very supportive of each other? I just love to go back inside that and talk about, just Gaylord and those characters. What a classic crew of guys.
Well, Merl, number one, was an excellent piano player, a great jazz piano player. And playing with Mickey Hart and the Grateful Dead, which I did for one little period there, Merl played organ. And his records basically are on organ, but he's a proficient musician. And in meeting him, basically I've been working a lot with Ralph McDonald. And some kind of way we met in in some bar or club, whatever the case may be. And Ralph was also very good friends with Bill Summers. And so, of course, Merl was in New York doing his project. And so he didn't have his cats with him. Back out in Oakland, those are the people that Merl, as a band leader, he hired them all the time.
That's right.
That was his particular crew. Although Heavy Traffic and Fritz the Cat, he came down to L.A. and did that with L.A. musicians. Those budgets aren't those kind of budgets like
right.
Steely Dan or something like that.
That's right. No, I know. It's interesting because I'm trying to figure. You played bass on Fritz the Cat. That's a very hard LP to find, and Heavy Traffic too. But I want to go back for a minute. You just said something very interesting that just piqued my interest. You said you played with the Grateful Dead, or was it a side project with Mickey Hart?
It was a side project with Mickey Hart.
And do you remember exactly what it was? I've never come across anything like this or heard anything like this.
Well, so long ago, it was something like I think his band was called Full Moon.
That's right, with Merl.
And with Merl, and I did a couple of concerts with him. Rehearsing at Mickey's house, and Joan Baez was around a lot. Joan Baez was also on those bills. I'm not quite sure though. But I remember some kind of connection between Mickey Hart and Joan Baez.
They were definitely in '81 when Full Moon was together. They were together. They were in. So you are, dude. Great memory. That is awesome. I mean those. Well, go ahead.
Merl is one of my favorite people. The memories of him are just great. And of course, I know his kids real well. And anything about the Bay Area when it comes to Merl Saunders, I'm very close to it.
No, that's funny because Tony was one of my first guests on when I was on AM radio, and when he sent me his CD, I wrote the liner notes, but you were quoted on that CD, which is classic. I love that.
It makes me feel like an old man.
No.
I remember he was about 10 years old, maybe younger than that. As a matter of fact, I knew Tony when he was about 8.
Oh, my Okay, so but this is interesting because you met Merl. Merl was never based in New York. How did you meet? Did you go out to? Did you ever play? I'm just gonna take a chance out here. Did you ever play in like with any of those jam sessions at the Matrix or in San Francisco? Some of these at the Fillmore West, some of these organ trio, like with Richard Groove Holmes or Merl. Did you ever play in those types of settings?
No, I played with Merl at a couple of festivals in San Francisco. You know, city festivals outdoors.
Right.
I would go up from L.A. and play with him, and him and his nephew Eddie. I can't think of Eddie's name.
Eddie Moore.
Eddie Moore, yeah.
Oh my God! You know that? You know that what happened to Eddie Moore?
I know that he died.
Do you know how? This is really an amazing story. He's at Yoshi's playing a gig, and the last note, I forget what song they're playing at the encore, the last note, he hits it, and he suffers a massive heart attack, falls over, and dies. Amazing. He died on the bandstand.
Eddie was a very large man.
He was I would listen to some of the stuff he did with Dewey Redmond. That guy had serious chops. It was amazing. Unbelievable, really.
You know, Merl was Sonny Rollins' nephew.
Merl was Sonny Rollins' nephew, or Eddie Moore, or because I know Eddie Moore played with Sonny Rollins, but are we sure? Merl, I don't know if there's any.
No, Merl. Sonny Rollins is his uncle.
Dude, Chuck Rainey, breaking news all over the place today. This is unbelievable.
He's also related to Tuck and Patty.
Unbelievable. And these, but that full moon, we're gonna have to track down some recordings of. So Mick, how did that come up? Mickey called you and was like, you were down in L.A. and he's like, I'd love you to come join the band. How did that?
Well, no, I was always up in the Bay Area. My wife at that time went to school there in San Francisco, and so we went up we went up all the time. And then I did some recordings with Walter Hawkins.
Of course.
With Edmund Hawkins. And we had rehearsals up there at Walter's church. They recorded them in L.A., so I was always in the Bay Area. I was always there. And as far as Mickey Hart goes, I got through that through Merl. They needed a bass player, and I was always there just about 2 or 3 times a month. And so that worked out real well. That's how I got involved with that.
Well, that's really interesting background information. That was off Merl Saunders' Fire Up album, but originally you can find that on another soundtrack that Chuck Rainey was on, along with Fritz the Cat, along with Heavy Traffic. This was called Black Girl. And we're going to put it in another piece now, and this is going to continue the groove, and we'll come back and we'll talk about it, Chuck.
All right.
The last time I played you a track off this album, there was so much distortion that you couldn't hear anything, and it pained me. And you said, well, when I worked with Hamp, I really liked doing the funkier tunes, the groovers, and that was called Josie Black off the album Universe. And that trumpet player was a guy, Oscar Brashear. But I love what you and Ndugu are doing on that, because it was, you guys were just, when you had a turn, you turned, and you guys were totally locked in there. It was beautiful.
Ndugu was a great drummer. Really making me feel old now, because I remember when he was 16 years old.
No, I mean,
and he just had his 60th birthday party last year.
And so, yeah, so I mean, but you're young at heart though, and let's be honest. I mean, you guys aren't. Would you consider yourselves from the same generation, or is he clearly younger than you?
I think that probably. Well, definitely not the same generation, but it's like the zodiac and like spring and summer. Like it doesn't just happen; they sort of blend together. When he was 16, I was 25.
I consider like 10 years kind of the thing. But anyway, you were older than when you first met him. You were already in Southern California. How'd you meet Ndugu?
I met Ndugu when I went to California on the 65 Beatle tour.
You got to me before. I was going to ask you about that. All right, so I don't want to get away from Ndugu, but so you met him. How'd you meet him on the Beatles tour? Was he just playing locally?
Oh no, he was in a band that Melvin Lasty managed, and Melvin Lasty was a trumpet player out of New Orleans, and he managed a band with Daryl, the Ndugu.
Daryl Claiborne. Daryl Claiborne,
Ndugu, Reggie Anderson, and I can't think of who the other player was. I think they were just a trio, but it was a band. They were at Locke High School in Southern LA, and visiting with Melvin, because after the tour was over, Dupree and I stayed there another 10 days because King Curtis was working at Filthy McNasty's for a week.
Right. So that. How did that? I read that last night for the first time, and how did the 65 tour? I mean, you could not have put a finger more closely on when electronic instruments were being introduced to the scene, and here you are in 65. Was it the Beatles' first tour of the States?
No, it was the second one.
Okay, and then and they approached you because.
Well, no, they hired King Curtis. Somebody hired King Curtis, and of course, I'm in the band, so I went along with King Curtis. Right,
and you were playing bass, or were you opening for the Beatles?
We had maybe that was a very long show, like a 3.5-hour show, and the situation was like King Curtis's band. We played behind 3 or 4 acts that were basically located in the U.S. So we played a good hour before the Beatles came on. So we played behind 4 or 5 acts, and of course we had our spot, which is on YouTube, by the way. We had our spot, and I think our spot was second. We had some go-go girls that danced, and we played for them. And then we played behind the next 3 acts that were from the U.S.
And that's interesting. One thing that struck my attention, you were talking about back in how much you love the tuba as an instrument and how much it's taught you. You listen to a lot of tuba, and it has a lot of impact on your bass playing. And I found that I understand in Dixieland, as I listen to more Dixieland, you really, the bass line is coming from the tuba. But what else are you looking for when you listen to the tuba, as far as how does it affect your playing and how does it open your mind?
Well, the tuba basically is the foundation of the orchestra. And in bands, they use the tuba like most Mexican music. You listen to it, they have a tuba player playing.
Like mariachi music.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we listen to a lot of that here.
Us too, yeah, no doubt.
The thing is, the tuba is the bounce. Like I'm also into show bands, show, marching bands, where they have 30. Most colleges now have at least 20 to 30 tubas in it for the power. When I was in college, we had one tuba player, and boy was he good. But I think
He
that
had to be.
before I got to college, though, there was a guy in Youngstown named Joe McBride who played tuba. He was also a bass player, but I was in the Elks Marching Band in Farrell, Pennsylvania, which is just on the other side of Youngstown. And Mr. McBride was an inspiration to everybody in the band. He had perfect tone. He was the only tuba in the band. We had about maybe 50 people, and he was the only tuba. And when the trumpet played, I was playing trumpet at the time, and when the trumpet section was having their rehearsals, he would always come in and help us read the music. So he read in the treble clef, but he would help us play it, the parts.
Mm-hmm.
I think we may have had maybe 12 trumpets, but he was a great inspiration for the way that he played the tuba, his tone, everything about it. Now, at that time, I didn't know that I was going to end up being a bass player, but I was really inspired by Mr. McBride. He is basically, he's passed now 4 or 5 years. But, what a great inspiration for just hearing the sound of that tuba, the bottom, the support of the band. And then, of course, you start listening to Dixieland music and you hear the tuba. And even in bluegrass, see, where I came up around a lot of bluegrass also in Ohio. And
That's right.
The bass player, wow. A lot of strength, a lot of power to continuously play those bass lines.
That's right, because chances are they were playing like an upright bass and there was no drummer, so they had to really swing the band. And I didn't even think about it. What kind of bluegrass were you seeing? Bill Monroe, or what were you seeing in Ohio?
Well, West Virginia is just right on the border.
Oh yeah,
South Ohio, and I'm not quite sure who I was listening to, but I heard a whole lot of it, a whole lot of it all the time. And of course, back in that day, they didn't have much of R&B; just had its spot late at night. So during the day or on the weekend, when you listen to the radio, you would hear just, bluegrass.
Right.
Also too, like I feel I've got a lot of New Orleans in me. My surname basically comes from New Orleans, and somewhere in my biological tree, New Orleans is in me because I really get a kick out of bands like the Dirty Dozen.
Sure.
Or those bands that just have a tuba player, especially the mariachi music here that we listen to. The tuba player is slamming.
I was going to ask you, I mean, we've talked about how you sort of, juggle your personal schedule based on where you want to go and what you want to do. How has the studio scene changed? I know you don't live in Southern California anymore or New York, but how has it changed for the proficient studio cat who grew up like yourself with you literally were exposed to every type of music, classical, bluegrass, R&B, all that stuff. But then you actually had an opportunity to go out and put your sound out there. And what is the studio scene like these days?
Well, I think it's primarily the same, except that you have more tracks and more ability to overdub. Back in New York, and also too, my days in California, you could overdub, but when you're just dealing with 4 tracks or 8 tracks, and you have, say, 5 or 6 musicians, or at least even 4, the drums take up almost 4 tracks by themselves. And so, overdubbing is kind of difficult. So back in that day, they did do a lot of overdubbing by way of, I don't know how they did. They didn't do as much overdubbing. I just got to correct myself. You have to play what's being played, the way it's being played. If you want a track by yourself, of course you could overdub. But a lot of the Motown music, you can hear that it's only 4 tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Because the bass you can hear the bass on all tracks. and also maybe the drums, you know. So today they have more tracks. So you can really sing about just about as many instruments that you want, you know, as you want to. So that's about the only difference that I see what it is. You know, you go in the studio, the player should know his instrument, no matter what kind of music it is, or else they wouldn't be called to do the date.
But isn't there something to be said for the idea of whether, you know, whether it was Blackbird with Donald Byrd? I remember talking to Roger Glenn and Mason and those guys. You guys would go in, get the charts 20 minutes before, then you'd have to hit it, have no time to think. And now people can sound, you can have a singer and they might sound terrible, and the producer's like, come up, come up, we'll fix it. We'll fix it. Mm-hmm. And to me, that takes away from not just the spontaneity, but the ability for real music to seep through. You can hear that overproduction. And to me, that really hurts. And I just was curious about your opinion. I mean, it takes away from the idea of that you only have 2 hours in the studio and you're just going to get the charts and you can't worry about whether you just do it. If you know your instrument, just do it. That's your generation. That's not there anymore.
Well, I would say that probably somewhere it is, but
right.
Like not as a whole. Most of the musicians that I played with in the studio, we have been out on the road with many, many artists, with a lot of experience at playing the instrument. And when you go into the studio, Jay, just think about it. Most music is in general is the same. You know, one rock song it may not sound the same, but it's the same technique. It's the same kind of style as the last one. They're all like the story goes, like if you learn one standard, now you have a good handle on how at least 7 or 8 more go, because it's all the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a mixture of where things go. And so, you know, once you have experience at playing in a lot of situations, when you go in the studio, 20 minutes before, the only thing that makes that different is the professionalism of going in and knowing my job is to play a bass part, basically. Well, depending upon what the style is. Now, the record that you just played was the same thing, but you know, you play the part so that just about anybody that can play similar. Make it sound like it's formatted. Like you mentioned, when you play Merl's song, mm-hmm. That part was written. I mean, the beginning bass line was written out because it's very consistent. But then once they got to the solos, then you just play it free off of the consistent line that was written. You just play off that line. So when you sit down and make up a part, you make sure that you play very similar, if not the same thing, the same kind of thing that you did in letter A when you get to letter B. And when you get to the chorus, you just do something a little bit different. That's within rhythm concept and melodic concept of the song. When you get to letter C, another verse, you sort of kind of play the same thing you play at verses A and B. And you make it up, so that it sounds like it was written, or that somebody, you know, it's like it's formatted. So 20 minutes ahead of time doesn't really matter when somebody gives you what the groove is and what the tempo is, and you have a chord chart in front of you. So with the experience, a studio player basically can make up something, especially a bass player,
mm-hmm.
can make up something rather simple in a way, or sometimes it can be complicated, but in having a feel for playing something that's sort of pushing everybody or making everybody happy, especially if you're making it up. A lot of artists and producers are very, very fortunate in that they hire people who have a feel for what it is almost immediately. A lot of sessions that I've done is we had it done in maybe 2 or 3 takes, but the producer or the arranger felt that you had to work harder at it. So by the time you get to the 12th or 15th take on a song, you realize you got to go right back to the first or second one, because now nobody's overthinking.
Yeah, I mean, is that somewhat of how the situation came about with Donald Fagen and Walter Becker and those guys? Were they pretty adamant about doing multiple takes on songs?
Well, see, this stuff is different. Walter and Donald wrote the kind of songs that were leaning toward jazz in a way. The only other band that I ever heard do something like that was a band called Supertramp, out of England, I believe.
I've never. So really, I'm gonna have to investigate that now, because they were doing rock, but they were doing jazz changes and that kind of stuff. So I know what you're saying.
Also, they had musicians that could transcend from playing rock. Well, if it's a rock song, you play rock.
Mm-hmm.
If it's jazzy rock or fusion, you do the same thing. It's got to make sense. Now, they did a whole lot of overdubs. I don't think I did that many. We usually ended up using something that was done earlier and maybe fixed a few places that didn't sort of hit where they thought it should hit with the drums or another instrument. But you see, Steely Dan, that's of the late stuff. They had a whole lot of tracks. They had a whole lot of money. They had a whole lot of time. And they had very good songs. And so we did do a lot of overdubbing then on some things. I know the Royal Scam, as far as I'm concerned, I just did it once. But I know that they probably did some overdubs. So those kind of things, sometimes you do it quick, sometimes you don't do it quick. But we're going back to earlier in the 60s, more or less had to get it done quick because of budgets. You know, you had to go in, if you got 12 musicians and you're paying them scale, now if you go over, now you got to pay them, you got to pay them for overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is they hire people who understand what the job is. The job is to play a part, if it's not written, to make up a part. That take the Archies, for instance. The Archies was a situation where it's popcorn, what we call the popcorn bubblegum music. But we understood what the target audience was.
Right.
This is Archie and Veronica, Mr. Weatherby. This is the pop culture. So you play something simple, or you play something that your average pop musician might be able to play, and that it sounds like that generation, as opposed to going into the same studio and playing a Louis Armstrong song where it's got to be in another genre. Now, of course, in playing these different genres, you got to listen to it. You got to be aware of what it is. And so the good studio musicians have been listening to all kinds of music all the time, mainly because that's what their intention is, or because they just love music. You go in, somebody says, we want to do something like so-and-so and so-and-so, or this is a feel like so-and-so and so-and-so. So if you know what that feel is or what kind of music it is, then you just get right to it. It makes the producer very happy.
The thing I like about you had guys like, Barksdale and, Bob Bushnell and that older crew, the generation before yours in New York, where they wound up, they had houses on Long Island. You guys were in the city, but that was a credit because you guys were willing to work for less money. And if there was bad weather, you guys were just always quicker. You guys get to the session earlier.
Plus the older guys too, the people you just named, those guys, after you, it's like me. You're working for 2 or 3 years, you're making money, you want to take a vacation.
Right.
Or you want to go out on the road with somebody. So when you're not there, who do they get? They call the next upcoming or known person that's doing, things in the city. And of course, living in the city is definitely a plus. It would take the guys that live on Long Island or even in Brooklyn, it would take them longer to get to a session at the last minute than it would me. I live right there in Manhattan. And a cab ride or a train ride would get me there within 10 minutes. Then.
We're going to play one more piece of music for Chuck Rainey, talking about listening to a lot of different types of music. This was important bridge music at a certain period in our history. So let's take a listen, and we'll come back.
When's it?
It's Johnny Hammond, Gear.
Oh, John Hammond. Mm-hmm.
John Hammond Gear. Same with the Mizell brothers there. When did that sort of the Mizells, when did that come on your radar, and what did they do that was kind of significant as a bridge from the R&B and soul and then sort of into the, I don't want to say disco, but it was the strings. What was their significance to music?
Well, I would say that Larry and Fonz came out of Howard University and in music. And when in L.A., they remind me of, I don't want to put them in the same bag at all. Don't misunderstand what I'm getting ready to say, but like, they wanted to involve, I'm going to cough a little bit on you, so excuse me. They remind me of, Phil Spector involved a whole lot of guitars and a whole lot of music in his music. And what the Mizells, Larry Fonz, and there was another, I'm trying to think of who the other guy was. They involved a whole lot of music, a whole lot of orchestra music.
Was it Skip Scarborough?
No, it wasn't Skip. Boy, that's a name from the past.
We're gonna keep doing it. Yeah. No, go ahead though. So
I'm trying to think of what it was.
I shouldn't.
Larry Fonz, and there was a third guy.
Right.
But they worked at it. They worked at orchestrating things. So I kind of think that's what made them different than everybody else. Even like with Donald Byrd, a lot of involvement in getting grooves. Like Jerry Peters, myself, and sometimes Clarence McDonald, Harvey Mason, and David T. Walker. We sort of kind of had a bond about rhythm, but because all those things are not done at one time. They would track it first and then add everything over it. So the whole thing about working with Fonz and Larry was to give them a good solid rhythm track so they can do what they did overnight. At the time, we didn't realize that. See, it's the skill of a studio musician to do something that's solid and consistent so that people like a Quincy or Larry and Fonz or other people, Benny Golson, or other people can now write over it without getting, having too much of a problem with the busyness of the rhythm section. So, I wish I could think of the other guy's name.
I thought maybe it was Jerry Peters, but it was, it wasn't Skip Drinkwater, was it? That's another cat.
No, this was a producer.
All right, we'll go back. I wanted to ask you two things quickly. I call up Chuck, a couple weeks ago, and he returns my call and is like, Jake, I'm up in the hills of Tennessee at a camp, and I had no idea that Victor Wooten was even still on this planet. I mean, and then let alone he's having a camp for kids in Tennessee. Talk about talk about the spiritual energy. Chuck, we all are going through our own lives, and we plateaus and mountains to climb. But what does that do for you, for your spirituality, and what do you see? What do you think your best thing you can do? Because I think one thing that we didn't talk about was that there is no record industry anymore. So we can talk about the essence of the studio, like the actual climate being the same, but the propensity and the opportunities to make a lot of studio music is not there per se. You could do it in your own studios, but what do you feel is your most important kinds of things that you can pass on to these kids?
Well, I would say whatever it is they're doing, because you see, I was one of those kids at one time. All the people that you mentioned, we were all young and new and experiencing what we thought music should be like and how it should be. So the young people of today and doing what they're doing, they already have a handle on what it is. I'm trying to think of what kind of advice I could give, and I can't really because it's their world.
Mm-hmm.
They do things the way they want to do it, how they want to do it, under the conditions that they're under in doing it. And they have it going on like we did. We didn't pay too much attention to what Barksdale or Bob Bushnell or any of those other guys. We didn't pay that much attention to what they did. All we did was just come in and do what we did. So the young people today, I can't really speak for them in any way at all, other than understanding that they are going to do what we did. And the generation before me, they did what they did. Now, of course, you see lessons. There are certain things that can only happen because the generation before you did them. But as far as going into the studio and making their music, just about everybody I know has their own little home studio. I got one for doing, what you need to do without spending money going to somebody else's studio because they've made things affordable, for recording.
Sure.
Nowadays, too, the quality of music, you can tell the quality, sometimes because you can tell whether it's a home studio. But a lot of these home studios sound great. It's just a matter of what people accept when they listen to it. So I guess to answer your question, I really can't not speak for them because they already got going on what they're going on. They're doing what they're doing. They're doing the same thing we did. All I knew basically was that some of the bass lines music changed. Just as I was coming up in New York, music had changed from just a basic boom to boom, 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 to boom, boom. It started getting busier. The music overall changed. Jazz, bebop jazz is about the only thing that has not changed. And that's still what it is. And your average pop song is what it is. So these young people, they already have it going on, Jake. But the only advice they can take from me is, if you're going to do it, be on time, and watch that ego, get the music done.
Just the measure of the strength of an individual. I want to end this conversation. If you would tell my audience about the trip you took to Japan with Marlena Shaw. If you would about really you were just recovering your health, getting back on your feet, and your doctor was opposed to it. But why don't you just fill in those gaps for us? Because I think it's a pretty inspiring story.
Yeah, well, I think it's very, very good for me. I do this trip with her every summer to Japan, and so this year will be, I think, our fifth one. The band is a great band. It consists of Harvey Mason, David T. Walker, and Larry Nash, and myself, and with Marlena. And we primarily were the rhythm section that did her album, Who Is This Bitch Anyway?
I love that album, Who Is This Bitch Anyway? I love that.
Yeah, it's a great record. And the musicians are just extraordinary. Now, there were more Bernard Eichner produced that record. And there were a couple other musicians that were on it, but we were the main core. And so in Japan, that's a very, very popular album, very, very popular. So we go there every summer to spend 10 to 20 days and doing, different performances at different places. And last year, I was told not to go by my doctor, but between me and Uni Gables, they paid me all up front, and I was not giving any money back. So I went ahead and got myself, together the best I could, and I went and made the trip. It was okay. I suffered a bit because my hand was a bit stiff, but nobody complained, and I did playing time. A lot of the things that I like to do, I was not able to do. But it's a family. We all love each other. The Billboard audience was great. They gave us a good review as usual. And although physically it was very rough for me, this year I'm going to be, of course, I'm a lot stronger now, and I'm going to be more comfortable. I think I did okay, but boy, was it a struggle, and I haven't struggled in many years.
Yeah, but you know what? The jewel, in some ways, is in the struggle. And the truth is that you pushed yourself to go. What you told me before was that everything was pretty good, but the encore of the last day, I mean, your hand got totally numb or something. It was just crazy. I mean, it's just, but it just laying it out there. And look, you're sitting talking to Jake Feinberg and ready to do it again. And I just think that sometimes the struggle, you just keep proving it over, prove it all night, as Bruce Springsteen said. But it just was really, I think it speaks to, and you're right, you are a family and you maybe weren't able to be as as literate on the bass as you would have liked. But, it was a step in the right direction. I'm just, and I think it's beautiful. I didn't know that there were a lot of jazz clubs left in Japan. Where do you guys play?
Oh, there's hundreds of them.
Okay. So, yeah, go ahead.
Japan is the largest city on the planet Earth. Did you know that? No, it's a fact. It's a fact.
Right.
They have 38 million people in the proper city of Japan. 38 million. It's the largest city in the world. Now, in that city, there's enough people to really love Latin, love jazz, R&B, they love rap, Caribbean music. You go into a Tower record store there, and you'll find it's amazing the different categories in different countries that they have music. You have a lot of people there, man. And so they have a lot of jazz is very, very popular in Japan. And you'll find just about every jazz artist in the United States, they go to Japan once or twice a year.
Oh, yeah, no, there's no doubt their appreciation is rabid for all types of music. It's why how do you account for that? I mean, does it date back to when we were reconstructing the country after we nuked it, or I mean, where does that fanaticism for improvisational music come from?
I have no idea.
Yes,
I do know though that all musicians from the States are treated as artists. They're treated like they're special. In this country, it lacks a whole lot of that. That's why a lot of musicians in all categories and genres of music love to go to Europe and Japan, because they appreciate the person performing from the from America, be treated as artists. And that's why everybody likes to go, because the audiences are great. They do appreciate it, and they do come out. They do come out, and they do listen. They do appreciate it. They applaud. They treat you like you're somebody special. So I don't know where that comes from, other than that's just what they... Now, they also have some very, very good Japanese musicians. Very good musicians. So I don't quite know where it comes from, but I do know that I really, not that I don't enjoy performing here at home when I do, but I play in Europe and in Japan more than I have anyplace else in the last 15 years, except an occasional local, party here, in Dallas or something like that. But basically, to make money and to perform, to put on clothes that are not just street clothes and perform. I really like Europe and Japan.
Do you just want to spend a minute talking about your partner in crime, the guys that kind of put the 16th note and the you turn the music. It was Bernard Purdy. It was your partner in crime for many years, and the guy I think still wears a suit and tie every day. I just was hoping you could talk a little bit about your relationship and if you guys still get together and play at all.
Well, we talk all the time, and we don't play as much as we together as we used to, because I don't live in that area anymore. But he's a very very good drummer. Him and I came up almost together. He was in the industry before I was, and in working with him, it was a blessing in a way. If I were a drummer, I would play just like him. And I'm pretty sure if he were a bass player, he would play like me. We have Bernard is I'm probably 3 days older than he is. I'm not quite sure when his birthday is, but we're born in June, 3 days apart. I may be a year older than he is. I'm not quite sure.
Mm-hmm.
But we're same, musically the same energy. And we played also too in a lot of clubs and dances in New York. So going into the studio and playing with him, like he's like a brother. He was just like a brother along with everybody else that I played live with in New York. First, before going into the studio.
When is your CD coming out?
It's out.
It's already out.
Well, it's not published yet, but it's been shipped.
Do you want to give us a little sneak peek into what the audience can expect?
Well, basically it's fusion music, but it's dance music.
Mm-hmm.
And I do about 4 or 5 covers, but I do them in a different feel. So, it's going to be published in about 10 days. I promised you on our last conversation to send you one on Friday.
Well, you're not spending $40 to send me it overnight. That's just not good. We have more than enough Chuck Rainey, but the next time we talk, we will definitely fashion that CD. I look forward to getting that. And Chuck, I just want to tell you, man, whether you come down to Sierra Vista or
by the way, my cousin died.
Oh my Jesus!
He died of lung cancer.
I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I am too, because I haven't spoken to him since I had my problem.
This is why, communication, this is the beginning of our conversation. You're talking about verbal communication with people that are in Japan. You're setting up the mics. You say, I'm not the same player as him. The wife goes back and trashes you, and then there's a whole kerfuffle. But then the lack of communication, and then this was recent, I guess, which is just a tragedy. I mean, I'm sorry to hear that. But what I want to say, go ahead, go.
I was going to say, it is sad. It is sad.
What I want to say is, my family, my wife and 2 daughters and I, we're taking a trip to Dallas to visit some friends of ours in October, and you can bet that I'll be giving you a call, and we can go and grab some iced tea and hang out for a while. I really look forward to it.
Man, that's great to hear, man. Make sure you give me heads up, because I will. I'm artist in residence.
I know. When we firm it up, I'll give you the dates, because I don't want you to be off in Victor Wooten country or something like that. It would just be fun to get together, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time today. And we will continue this conversation along the way.
All right, my friend, it's great talking with you.
All right, brother, take it easy.
I'm gonna do the best I can. You can count on that.
Keep being strong. Stay up, man.
All right, man. You too. Thanks again, Jake.
Thanks, Chuck.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It's the Jake Feinberg Show, and we'll see you all in a little bit.